At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Hello, fellow gamers, and welcome to the Video Gamers Podcast. It's very common for a game's artwork to capture our attention quickly, but what about the animation side of things? The people that take a game from concept art to interactive experience. Is animation as time-consuming as we think? What sets good animation apart from bad animation? Well, today we're going to find out as we dive into the world of art and animation in gaming. But first, some introductions are in order. I am your host, Josh, and joining me, a lot of you see him in 2D, but if he turns sideways, believe me, the 3D side of his face comes out. It's right.
That's how many, I
can't stop.
I am self-described with this big old nose of mine, but that's 2 in a row you put me on blast on the episodes, man.
I can do that because as a fellow big-nosed person, man, yeah. Oh, look at that. Yes, we're on.
Oh, I can smell colors. That's all.
Man. And joining us, the man with more talent in his little finger than Ryan and I combined is Sykosan.
Hey, nice to be here. Great to see you guys.
Man, it is awesome. It is awesome to have you, Sykosan. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
It's always a pleasure. I always love talking about animation and video games as well. So yeah, looking forward to it.
This is great. So, Sykosan, I'm just going to start off with the fact that you have already made an impression on this podcast with some of your art. So the rest of this episode is going to be very easy. For those that aren't aware, you did actually draw our kind of mascots that we have for this podcast now, which was really awesome to see kind of go from just a concept of, hey, let's have 3 little guys that kind of represent us, to your just kind of drawing of them in a, without any color or anything, and say, hey, how does this look? And we were all kind of blown away. And then to see the progress of you coloring them and designing them and kind of arranging them and all that has been awesome. So I know a lot of our listeners are already familiar with some work that you have done and the talent that you have in that regard. But for people that don't know, you have also done a good bit of animation work in gaming, and not only in gaming, but a Katy Perry video that we will talk about a little bit later as well. Cool. And so we are really excited to have you join us and really kind of give us some insight into art and animation and how that ties into gaming and just the world as a whole as well. So,
I hope I can inspire some people in the way. That'd be cool. Animation is a great world, and it's just like video games. It's full of similar things, it's very, very close. So, yeah.
It's neat because it's like, I think as gamers, and I kind of touched on that, where it's like we see, a new game come out and we go, oh man, the art style in this game is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like we just talked to some of the developers for a game called Tales of Iron 2. It's an indie game. Really, really neat, unique kind of art style there. And it's one of those things where everybody goes like, oh man, the art in this game is awesome. But as gamers, like we don't ever talk about animation. Like without animation, we don't have video games, but it's one of those things where I think it's kind of a blind spot for us. So that's one reason we're really excited to have you on the show and kind of just get a look into some of that stuff, because, I think it's something that we don't necessarily put enough emphasis on. And we're dying to know a little bit more about it. So,
Yeah.
And so we have, that's one of those things that we have been doing. We've been talking to different people in the industry. We've chatted with some voice actors. We've chatted with some game developers, some designers. Cool. Now we're talking with you, obviously, to kind of get a look at that side of things, which is really exciting for us. But we always like to kind of start off, because we are a gaming podcast, and we like to just say, hey, let's chat games for a little bit so people can kind of get to know you a little bit more as well. Cool. And so we always reach out and we always say, hey, what are some of your favorite games that you've played, in the past, or, some gaming memories and stuff like that. And so you mentioned a love of some old school games, and you mentioned some of these like Street Fighter.
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
I mean, if you know my work, you'll know I'll just keep drawing these characters even today. And I'm still definitely more influenced by the original Street Fighters than the latest ones. Yeah.
Yes, I was a huge fan of Street Fighter too. I've told the story many a day of spending way too much time in the arcades and pumping quarters into those things and stuff like that. You also mentioned Bubble Bobble, Prince of Persia, and Monkey Island. I mean, these are some all-timer games.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, it's a long time ago. I forget even what the story was in some of these games. But yeah, they just stayed with me. The designs, the style. I think I was very much influenced by the looks. That's what the first thing that would attract me to a game. It was the looks, and these games looked really good. They looked amazing at the time, and still today they do. I hope we'll talk about that too. So some of them still stand on their own 2 feet despite the new technologies and everything.
That's something that's so cool and unique too with and it shows how important a good art style is to a game, is when something can hold up 30 plus years later. It shows how impactful that is, and then also like the influence it has on people. I know we were talking before and you had mentioned, some of these games did influence your art and your design styles and how you kind of look at the way you draw characters and animate now. But yeah, it's so cool to see what it can do to people.
I've got memories when I was a child and going to the arcades, right? That's what we used to do to get the best games, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
And I would just I didn't have enough money to play for hours. I just had a little bit of money, and I would play a couple of games and whatnot, and then just stand around for hours or as long as I could, just looking at other players, or just looking at the opening sequences that I've got in the arcades. And I would look at just observe the characters and how they move and their attacks or whatever, because usually it's fighting games most of the time. Yeah. But we talked about Bubble Bobble, for example. It had a really cute style, and the design of the monsters, just a few pixels wide, they were still very clever and very expressive. It was fascinating for my childhood eyes. I was absolutely mesmerized by those. So yeah, I remember just now about these IREM games. I think I don't know if I say that right. It's IREM. They made these ninja games, and I think IREM Corp was the one that did R-Type. I think I forget that too. But R-Type was
R-Type's a throwback, man.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was so good, so good. Yeah, I was a massive fan of that. I don't know about you guys, but I have these songs in my head sometimes from video game times that just keep coming back. And on my playlist, I've got some games tunes just because I enjoy listening to them again. Yeah, it just marks you for life, I suppose. That's what it is.
It really does. It's funny because I remember begging my parents for a Sound Blaster card, because way back in the day, you didn't have music in games. Right. You only had your little PC speaker, and it could only make little bleeps and bloops, and that was it. Right. And I remember the Sierra games started coming out, and they had music in them, but you couldn't play the music unless you had an actual sound card for that. And people don't know how far we've come, man. Not to sound like the old man, but it's like we have come a very long way.
Look, we're lucky. We're lucky we've seen it all coming to life. We've lived it through it. There's only one time in history when video games came to be, and we were there. So that's fantastic.
We're right in it, baby. Heck yeah.
It's true. I know. I love it. I got to say, I love that Prince of Persia is one of the games that you mentioned, because I remember Prince of Persia coming out and thinking the animation in that game was second to none. Nobody had done like this leaping and grabbing a ledge and then climbing up on the ledge. Like, that was unheard of. So that was the thing with Prince of Persia.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the game. It was like, look how this guy is moving.
Absolutely. I think the technique they used was a technique called rotoscoping, which is, you could say, a little bit cheating, but honestly, even Disney used these techniques and they're perfectly fine. The idea is that you use an actual footage of a real person as a base for your animation. Doesn't mean that you copy everything, because you have to reinvent the design, you have to simplify it, you have to add the style to things, and all the effects. There's plenty of work to be done, but it gives you a solid base. And I think they had two things. They had this good modeled footage, and they had more frames. You needed to have the technology to have more frames for your little pixel art, and your little how do you call them? Sprites. That's it. Sprites.
Yep. I was going to offer that, and then I was like, I'm going to sound really stupid if that's not the right.
I haven't used that word in forever. So you can only use so many drawings, I suppose, back in the days. But it was good to see that fluidity, that motion. It was beautiful.
It was really something groundbreaking at the time. So I love that you brought that up as well. So, and then we get into the Nintendo and the emergence of some of these 3D games. Famously, you mentioned Tomb Raider. I think we all remember Tomb Raider coming out and just blowing our minds, because now we have 3D models, and it's like, we're living in the future.
I know. The thing is that 3D had been around for a little while, right? It was coming, right? We were expecting great things from 3D, but I think this one was the first one to really give a glimpse of what we could expect. There's just the fluidity, the nice designs, the clever move, controls and whatnot. So yes, I think there was a big leap forward with that game that really kind of said to everyone, well, buddy, this is the future, right? At that point, you knew, because before that, the 3D was so clumsy and clunky in so many ways. But after that, it was like, no coming back now. This is 3D game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember, you're going from, games on the, Sega, Nintendo, and these side scrollers and while they may have looked good, there was nothing like it when this came out. And I remember fighting, as a kid, fighting like a tiger. And I was like, this is the best graphics I'm ever going to see in my whole life. Like, look at this thing. It looks like a real tiger, Mom. Look at it. And I was like, don't look at her. Don't look at Lara Croft, though, because then I won't be able to play the game anymore. But let's focus on that.
Do you, we're talking about these kind of 2D games versus when we started to get into the 3D world. And, we're kind of seeing almost this resurgence of like the 8-bit and 16-bit pixel art kind of thing that we see, especially from a lot of indie games. I am a self-professed graphics snob. Like, I love just cutting edge technology graphics. Like, oh, this looks so good. That kind of thing. But I am also softening. And I do love art. So a game that has a really neat art style really draws my attention too.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference? Like, how do you do you like pixel art? Do you think this 8-bit, 16-bit thing is interesting?
Yeah, this is a great question, because you wonder, right? We tend to think, I think it's probably a default position. Most people think better graphics is just going to be better, right? Why would you look back and go back to something that's less detailed or less smooth? But the thing with art in general is that it's never been about being realistic. If you look at any, like the history of painting, there was a time first when you start with simple drawings, there's a lack of experience or lack of tools, and then painters develop these new art style that become more and more realistic. And then eventually, when you get to a certain realism, you go back to stylized style, and Picasso came along when he knew how to paint realistic things, but suddenly decides to do cubism, and people were like, oh, this is great. It comes down to the fact that there are different styles, and I think we appreciate different styles, and that's all it is. And when 3D comes along and it's a new thing, everybody's interested because we're exploring a new avenue. That's what it is. 3D is like a new thing with a new look. So we throw ourselves into it. We want to see how far we can push it. And I think 3D has now basically attained its maturity. We have great styles that really are perfectly controlled. It feels like 3D can hardly get any better. It's so good that, it's so hyper realistic. We can do a fantasy, we can do realism, all that, no problem. Special effects are just mind blowing. So now we've sort of reached the end of that world. In principle, we know what we can do with it. So we're always curious to find new things. So we go back to other styles. And what's the beauty of a sketch, for example, is that it's simple. Just a little line on white paper can do something interesting. Why? Because it's stylization of the real world. And everybody, if it's done well, everybody's going to like it. You don't have to go full realism to make something interesting. And I think that's what's happening with pixel art. Pixel art is interesting because it's a simplification, it's a stylization of the world, and it's interesting in itself. As long as it's interesting, it will always be there, I think. It's like, to me, it looks like a painting, because the pixels are big and colorful and bright, and it has this appeal of a beautiful painting when you just brighten up the colors and simplify the drawings. So
I think we've done some really, I say we, not me, but artists have done some really neat things with pixel art lately too, where
right.
I don't know if you're familiar with a game called Dave the Diver, but a very, very popular game that came out a year or two ago, and it's all pixel art.
Oh, cool.
But they've utilized like pixel art with, I don't even know how to describe it, with like effects and backgrounds to it and stuff like that, to where it's actually gotten really beautiful. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying about the simplicity of it, but I feel like with people kind of going back to using pixel art and then enhancing it, they've kind of done some really, really neat things with it at the same time, to where even somebody like me, where normally I go like, yeah, it's not my thing. Like I can look at that and go like, okay, like this looks really neat, man.
Yeah.
Like they're doing some really cool stuff with this
absolutely,
now too.
absolutely.
So.
Well, there's other things than just the details. There's like, for example, the atmosphere of a game, the colors, the mood. So you can create with simple shapes. You can put an atmosphere into your game, and that in itself can be appealing. So and what you see with 3D a lot is that this is a bit harder to control. Let's say an artist is painting something just directly, putting colors on the screen. They have a full control of what it looks like. They can decide at any moment, I want to have particles there, I want to have a reddish hue over here, and then it can create that mood exactly the way they imagine it. If you do 3D, you have to go through the rules of 3D, which is completely different. You have to put a light in there. You have to use the sort of recreation of real life effects to get the result. And you change a light bulb somewhere, and that changes the mood of the whole scene. It's really hard to combine things in a way that you get exactly what you imagine. And that makes it harder for 3D artists to create very specific looks. And that's why they've been challenged to do 2D. It's funny how 3Ds try to do 2D look for so long. They have these cell shading styles, these lines outside of 3D. They're desperate to recreate that crazy control that 2D has. And 2D will always have that freedom that they can draw exactly what they want at any moment. And 3D doesn't have that freedom. So that's an advantage of traditional medium, right, over 3D.
It has been interesting to see that. And then we've been noticing just, kind of in the gaming world, we've been seeing a lot of things coming back to that. We've been seeing almost this blend of 3D and 2D to where they're taking that kind of 2D look and they're creating depth with it by, layering in. We had the guys from Oddbug on, and he was showing us his design software. And it was so interesting to see how they can stack this stuff up to make something that is 2D, but so unique, and like I said, have that depth to it. It's just been, there's all these games that they're doing it with now, and we're seeing it more and more. Is that also like something that you kind of like, that approach and the way they're able to make those 2Ds even more unique?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. And I think this is why 2D will never die, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because it's a source of inspiration even for 3D. Like 2D guys would explore new avenues, and the 3D people would be like, yeah, I find that interesting. I'm gonna bring that into. But I think, funny enough, I did a lot of 3D myself. Actually, I started in 3D. Before I did 2D. So I studied architecture, and I was using a 3D package back in the days. And then when I graduated, it's only after that I started looking into animation. But I was essentially a 3D guy at first, and I learned a lot from 3D. There's a way to approach lighting, to approach colors, and also comping the colors to make things look a certain way. And I sort of transferred some of that understanding to the way I paint. So when I draw characters, I kind of separate layers in a way that 3D does it. And so sometimes I have students and they ask me about my approach to drawing. And there's some very different approach. You could have like the sort of traditional painter approach where you just pick the exact color that you want and you go with that. But my approach, for example, is a more layered and constructed approach where you have a base color and then you got some light on top and some shading, and then you add some effects you layer things on top. So that sort of layered approach is very much akin to 3D approach, and one is feeding the other, right? There's a back and forth between 3D and 2D, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Yeah.
It's a neat mix. It's interesting. Again, I kind of talk about gamers and we don't really have a lot of idea. We just play the games that are in front of us and we can kind of go, oh, this is pretty. But yeah, that kind of getting that look behind the scenes a little bit, where it was like, here's a 2D rendering, and then he rotated it around and it was like there were 12 different layers in this 2D rendering, and it was like, this is how they do it.
Yeah. And it's like, it's still 2D, but it's just something almost completely different. It's like its own thing, which is just, it's so interesting to see.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we're going to get into, I want to talk about the animation side a little bit here in just a second. But we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Business taxes. Was stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on turbotax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
All right, we are back chatting with Sykosan. Man, oh, this is awesome. I love these glimpses into the talent that is, that just exists out there, and how that relates to gaming and just the skills, man, that people have that go into these things.
Yeah, I think people would love to know a bit more about what the people who do those games, right, and how they do it. But we'll get to this, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why we've been trying to talk to various people like that work in gaming and try to get a glimpse at like, what is this like behind the scenes? What goes into these games that we get to play and experience and things like that. So let's talk about animation, because again, I think this is a really big blind spot for a lot of people. It's one of those things where, we talked about Prince of Persia. Like that was a game that absolutely you could tell that the animation in that game was just cutting edge for its time, that kind of thing. But and again, this, we're kind of dumb here. We like to ask the questions that, gamers' brains come up with. But I, at least in my brain, like to me, art and animation kind of go hand in hand. Like they are, I don't want to say one and the same, but like if you are an animator, are you also an artist, or are they sometimes exclusive, where it's like an artist might like create something and say, hey, here's this character, this drawing. And then an animator who may not have an artistic bone in his body can take that and say, oh, okay, cool. Let me turn this into something that moves. Yeah. So are they separate? Are they together a lot of times?
They can be separate, but I would say definitely an animator is also an artist. You have to look at animators, I think, a little bit more like actors in movies, right? You would say of an actor that they are artists, right? They don't paint, they don't make music, they act. That's what they do. And that's what animators do. That's how often I describe it to people as an animator. I'm like the actor on the set, except that instead of acting things live, it just takes hours and hours of drawing frames after frames to get the same result. But we kind of act things out. For example, when I have a shot to do, I just get off my chair and then maybe I'll film myself and I'll try to act out the scene to see how it is. So I become the actor and then I try to translate that into drawings. So yeah, it's very much an art. Now, however, you don't need to draw necessarily, particularly since 3D. In fact, well, if you're doing 2D animation, you need to know how to draw, obviously. But if you're a 3D animator, you in the ideal scenario, you're given a character that's entirely set up, rigged. And in video games, it's the same. You have to do these animations, and the character could be prepared for animation. And when you come in, you have a sort of setup of tools to move the face, to move the arms and legs. And that's when you come in and make everything move. And you don't need to draw at all. You may never have used a pencil before and still be a great animator. But often it's understood that the principles of 2D animation that we've developed through the years early are simply translated into 3D, and they learn the same lessons. They learn the same approach. The keyframe approach to animation is 12 principles of animation used in the US particularly. I'm French, so in France we don't really talk about the 12 principles. It's a slightly different culture to animation, but we have a lot of animation schools here and tons of animators around the world because they tend to travel a lot. I'm in London. I live in London, so I'm one of those French people who just exported themselves to somewhere else.
That's awesome. So now, I love this stuff. I find it so interesting. So you mentioned, you'll get up and you'll record yourself doing some movements for a scene and you become the actor to help you animate that,
Mm-hmm.
Does that kind of go in line with, does this really take as long as we all think it takes? Are you really putting in that much time? Is it that time labor kind of that takes it just over and over so many hours? You mentioned 1 million hours. Is it really that involved?
Yeah, I mean, if I want to do good animation, if you're talking about a scene where a lot is happening, it's not just a mouth moving, it will take me about a month to do about 10 seconds of animation.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Whoa.
And I'm not exaggerating.
A month for 10 seconds?
Yes. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, actually. It's funny. Just the average viewer will associate animation with children often. And they tend to think that all these TV programs for children must be cheap. And it's everything but cheap. In fact, the industry is huge for children TV content. And the teams and the studios that work on every episode that your children may watch on TV, they cost an awful lot of money because they take a lot of hands and a lot of people working on them, particularly 2D animation, but 3D animation too. The thing is that it's funny how, because of 3D, you'd think, you could save some time. Yes, it might take less time to animate one shot, but you still need to build the 3D environments, build the 3D object. And all of this is also extremely time consuming. So they found other ways to spend the money and their time so that the budget is entirely spent at the end of it. But yeah, 2D is extremely expensive. Think about, if you love a Disney movie, traditional, I don't know, pick The Lion King, for example. Go on Wikipedia. I
was going to say Lion King. Yes.
Go on Wikipedia and look how much it costs. And essentially, usually it's about $1 million per minute film. That's the budget.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, it is.
Oh, my goodness, man.
That is, geez, that's wild.
So is it safe to say that you need an awful lot of patience to be an animator?
Yeah, a feature film would take something like 200 people working for 5 years straight to put out a movie that's an hour and a half.
Oh my goodness, man! Wow,
I never ever would have thought. We always thought it was involved and it was very time consuming, but some of those numbers just are mind-boggling. But I guess when you're going to do it and you have to do it right, and I know a lot of times, artists are very particular about their art and they want it to be a certain way. So I'm sure that lengthens the process. But man, those numbers are just
It's funny because like I think this is maybe one of those times when we're actually right in our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like my kids, both my kids love digital art. You know, they draw on Procreate on their iPads, and
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
I'm pretty proud. They're pretty good, man. So you know, proud dad moment there too. But one of my daughters kind of started to get into animating, and I think it's the program Blender, if I remember right, is on Steam, and it's free, and you can play around with that. And I remember her, you know, she really started to try to dive into some animating stuff.
Cool.
It took her, I feel like, 6 hours to make like a T-Rex just roar. And that was it.
Yeah.
And it was really neat, but I was just like, this took 6 hours? Like,
Yeah,
oh my
no.
goodness, like, does it really take this long? But
It
apparently
does,
it
yeah.
really does. So.
Yeah, you have to be, patience is key. Absolutely. Like if you want quick results, it's not a job for you. But
Yeah.
I think we take an enormous amount of satisfaction in bringing to life a drawing. I don't know what it is. We'll accept to do that. We'll accept to spend days and hours on just a few frames, and then we'll be just so happy to see it move. I don't know what it is. It's the magic of it. It's the magic of it.
I think it is. I mean, I think that's why we see something. You mentioned kind of the sketch drawing, right? Where it's simple and but I almost think like our brains kind of imagine what that could be, you know, as far as like, we kind of fill in the blanks in a sense, and my brain might fill it in a different way than your brain does. And I think that's sometimes why the simplicity can be such a good thing. I would love to ask about this because you mentioned, I don't know that you used the terms good and bad, but you mentioned like a simple animation with just like a mouth moving versus like a whole character.
Right.
And so one of these things that we get are I'm just going to call it good animation versus bad animation. And I've seen, you know, you've done some anime characters on your Instagram and things like that. And so, you know, this is something where I think when we kind of switch from gaming to anime, that a lot of people do actually say the animation in this is so good. Like Demon Slayer, I'm a fan of Demon Slayer.
Right.
I like it. And one of those reasons is my daughter, who's a huge anime fan, and I watch it with her, has even said, Dad, the animation in Demon Slayer is so good. Like, you're going to love it. And then we've watched some other anime, and it's like, okay, well, the animation in this one isn't so good. Not throwing any shade, but, you know, okay, you can tell the difference in the quality.
Yeah.
So when we think about good animation and bad animation, so to speak, is it like, what is the qualifier? Is it just like the smoothness of the motion?
Not so much,
Is
actually.
it, Is it like a camera angle that maybe they did an animation in a unique perspective or something like that? But what's that difference?
Yeah, it's true. There's quite a few sort of parameters that you can look at that make an animation a good animation. If like in video games particularly, I think one of the things that made Street Fighter 2 exceptional was the quality of the animation, because the designs were amazing already, but the way they moved, the impact, the weight, and that was very good animation work. You know, it made you feel the power of the characters and how they moved around. So it had not only style, but it had personality. So I think what makes a good animation is a good drawing. Right. If you have a good drawing, you've got a good start. But you can have also a simple drawing, or a drawing that's on purpose made to look a little bit unpleasant or even ugly. But you can have a great animation behind it. Again, the animation will be delivering the acting, will be delivering the personality of the characters. Now, the second key factor is the keyframes, actually. So having good posing, think about body language. You saying something, how are you saying it? What are your shoulders doing? What are your hands doing? How's your face looking? So you need to pose your character in a good way. So good keyframes is already half of the way there with a good design. So you could have on the process of making the animation, you start by those keyframes or some rough thumbnails, as we call them. If they're well made, you can see the animation already. You can feel the character already, even though it's not smooth. There's no in-betweening, so it's just very choppy animation. But the posing is so good that you feel the character's emotions already, and that's already a good start. Then the in-betweening process is a matter of making it more or less polished, if you want. It's like fine-tuning your animation. And that depends a lot on budget. Disney, they would have the money. They'd be like, okay, I'm going to animate this 24 frames per second. So for every second, you're going to have 24 drawings. And if you have 10 characters on the screen, that's 10 times 24 drawings. That's the way it is. So if you have the money, okay, but you don't, making TV series for Netflix, maybe you don't have a huge budget. So you're going to have to pick and choose. And that's what Japanese studios have been good at for all these years. They'll give you some very simple shots to tell the story, and with a minimum amount of animation. And when it becomes important, you'll have an action scene or something emotional happening. Then they bring in the best animators, right? And they'll give them all the money and the time that they need to make those scenes count. And in a video game, you get a little bit of that too. The thing is, it's a bit different because a video game, you have your character moving around, and you're going to see that jump, that run, that slide again and again and again. So you need to nail that. You need to make that look really, really good as much as you can. So there's a lot of attention that is put on these little scenes, more even than maybe on a TV series or something like that. And so you got few animations, but that still takes an awful lot of work. So smoothness is important. It helps sort of giving in that premium look. But I think what's important is good keyframing and good drawing is really the essential thing. Quality. Yeah.
That's awesome. Did you, so now with, we had mentioned that you did the Katy Perry video with the animations there. Did you kind of put those kind of things to effect in that one? Is that how you kind of
absolutely
went
it's
about
true.
that? Yeah.
We had three months to make 3 minutes essentially, which is horribly short. And so I kind of kept the animation like as simple as possible for most of the shots. And right from the beginning, there are some shots that are a bit more interesting. There's a dragon in there. There's a dancing scene. There's different things that definitely take more attention. There's a transformation scene right at the beginning where she's sort of a very anime inspired thing where she's a witch, turns herself into a little dress, and she jumps on a little broom to fly off. So there was a lot of references to anime in there, and that approach was very similar. We're going maybe 90% of the shots are actually quite simple. The characters don't move too much. There's not much happening, but when it's important, we put more time in it. So I could spend a couple of days or a day or two on one simple shot, and I would spend a whole week on a few seconds for that one shot that's important.
So since we're talking about the Katy Perry video, because I'm very curious about this, and I think a lot of our listeners would be as well, when you get, hired to do that, so to speak, and somebody famous says, hey, I want you to animate one of my music videos. Number one, I have to assume that's like this is super cool moment for you, number one.
Yeah.
And then how does that work? I mean, do they have are you going back and forth and saying, here's my idea, what do you think? Mm-hmm. Is there feedback? Because I know my wife is an artist, and I know sometimes criticism as an artist is very hard to take for people, because it's this is how I express myself. And when somebody criticizes my work,
yeah, absolutely,
that can be tough.
You have to accept that. It's important to understand that you're working for a client at the end of the day, if that's what you're doing, and you need to listen to them and give them what they're looking for. So this back and forth is always there normally, and it can be quite a lot of back and forth before things really start being produced. There's the design phase, if you want. In the Katy Perry scenario, it was quite different. In fact, it was a very interesting and unique moment in time. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic that it happened. And so essentially for the music industry, from one day to the next, they couldn't put people together to do a typical music video where people are dancing. That was not happening anymore. So a lot of studios turned to animation, and that's the cool thing. They were like, oh, we're going to use animators. They can work from home. They can do some really cool animated music videos, which was great. It just kind of was amazing for the animation world. So a lot of artists decided to do that. And that year, it's not just that. Katy Perry was pregnant. And she wanted to release a new album and give birth on the same day. All right, that's crazy.
Oh,
and she did.
Yeah.
So she planned it all. That was crazy, right? She did manage to make one of the music videos for a new album early in the year. She was heavily pregnant. I don't know if you've seen the video. She made a music video heavily pregnant. And then for the rest of the videos, she had time for another video where she played into, and everything else was going to be animated. So they made one 3D animation, in which they put a lot of money in, definitely a bigger team. And okay, they went for a big studio and they splashed out. And then they still had like 10 other videos to make or something. They're like, how are we going to do this? So they had a budget, they split it out, and they went for this strategy that said, well, we're gonna say we want different styles, and we're going to ask studio to pitch for it. But because of the limited amount of time, it was a matter of, she received the pitches and she was like, okay, I'm going to pick that one, and you just do it. So I was contacted by this Partisan, which was an animation studio in contact with Katy Perry. And they asked me if I wanted to pitch. And I said, yeah, that'd be interesting. You got 1 week. It's like, no time. Oh. Okay, I'm gonna come up with an idea. They gave me five pieces of music. And I said, you can pitch for all of them. I said, okay, I'll pitch for all of them. So I made 5 pitches in a week, and very short, just one little page, one little drawing, concept essentially. And I had a favorite one, and it was Cry About It Later. I was like, that'd be nice to get that one. And that's the one I got. And then they asked me, how many can you make? I was like, just one is enough. There's barely enough time. So I was like, no, I can only do one. So, and the funny thing is that I was working on another music video already for another artist, a British artist. And I kind of had to jump out from that project into the Katy Perry one, because I was like, I really want to do this. And I was going to direct it. I was going to do all the designs, and it was my concept. I came up with a story, and Katy Perry is very easygoing, honestly. And it's been one of the easiest projects I've had to work on. And I think she was aware of the lack of time, because there was no room for back and forth. But she did ask for a few things to be changed, and we did it. And every time I suggested something new, she was like, yeah, that's fine. And so it was pretty easy. So yeah, that was very exciting. And she managed to release all these music videos. And on the day that she gave birth, she released the album, she gave birth, that's a big thing, and she released my video. That was cool. So that was mine that came out on that day.
That's really neat.
It was great. Yeah.
That is wild. Those are those things, the behind the scenes that you don't know about, man.
Right.
That's such a cool thing. So I'm still stuck. I want to go back a little teeny bit to where you were talking about, 10 characters on there by 24 frames a second, with how many drawings that actually entails, with as technology advances, and we're seeing kind of the advancement of motion capture and how far it's come. Mm-hmm. They're doing everything from people to animals, everything's getting motion captured now. True. Which I love watching, but does it lose some of that artistic feel for you? And like what are your thoughts on the kind of the whole motion capture part of it?
I'm okay as long as what you're looking for is some realism. I think that's the objective. By recording reality, you get that extra realism. It's a similar thing to Prince of Persia. You get that realism of motion. It was the same thing because you're tracing real footage. So I don't mind that. I think this is one direction that you can take. And the thing is that you have to explore it in a way, all the way to the end, see how realistic you can get. And once you get there, then you pull back, you come back and you be like, oh yeah, that was interesting, but how about we go back to using animators to do this? Because animators have a different way to stylize motion. Actually, it's not just about stylizing the look of things or the colors, but there's a way to move. Like Disney characters move in a certain way, anime characters move in a certain way. Yeah, think about theater. Theater, they have a way of talking and a way of moving around the stage to make themselves visible, right? And that was translated into cinema when cinema came along after theater. They were just acting like a theater, but on screen. And it was kind of overacted, and very loud. Oh. And we don't do this anymore. After that, there was a phase of realism where we'd shoot people as if they were normal people, and they would use actors that were not actors so that they would play normally and not overplay things. There's this whole thing where we kind of change styles. So I think it's okay. It's fine. Let's go. Let's explore realism and motion capture, and then we'll come back afterwards. It's okay.
I can't help but think, because this is something you touched on, and it's really kind of opening my eyes a little bit to something. And I just think this is fascinating. But when we were talking about pixel art versus like very realistic graphics and stuff, you kind of touched on the same thing, that you can only go so far in realism before it just looks real. You know?
Exactly.
I mean, and motion capture is kind of the same way, right? Like, yes, you can get somebody that looks like a human that is running, or a horse in the way that they gallop, and you can put that in a video game, and cool, now you have a very realistic horse that is running. But there's only so much. Like, realism is going to cap out at it's real.
It's perfect.
And okay. I love that you kind of brought this up, where, you know, we can go that direction, but it's capped. But when you aren't going for realism, and you are going for artistic, and you are going for these different animation styles and flares and things like that, this is where you get to have these really unique expressions in a game, or art styles that stand out to people, or even the way things move in a game, to say, hey, this is, you know, yes, it's not realistic, but look what we can do with it, you know? And I don't think that's something that a lot of people think about. And I just find it fascinating to see, yes, we can push the boundaries, but we're going to pull back at some point too.
That's right. We want to go back to a style. I think about Batman, you know, the anime series or the animated.
Yeah.
It's certainly not about being realistic. It's those sharp angles, those bold moves, those bold colors in contrast. There's appeal in that. So we don't want to lose that. Nobody wants to lose this. So if you don't have it, then eventually you'll go back to that as well. Be like, yeah, I want to go see that look again. There's all these different things. They come and go with fashion, right? And then fashion comes back as well. Same animation, it comes back. So pixel art, I'm sure will always come back.
Bell bottoms and big jeans are back again, right? So, Sykosan, let's talk about your artwork for a second, because it is spectacular, man. We're going to include a link to your Instagram page in this episode description, but I mean, I don't say this lightly, but like, it's really good, man. Like, obviously you've made this your career, you've made this your passion.
Yeah.
You're here on, you know, our show talking about it, but I love the style that you have. I love just the things that you create. But one of these things that I struggle with is the, like, do you know, trying to get into the mind of an artist, so to speak, like do you see things like in your brain and then you're able to just kind of put them on paper? You know, my wife, for instance, she's a good artist, but she has to have a reference, right? She's not like creative. She can't just come up with something on her own. But if you show her something, she can absolutely take that and then kind of make it her own and change it up and go, cool, this gave me a good reference point.
Yeah.
So how does it work for you? Like, how do you create something from nothing as an artist?
It's a very good question. Actually, it's a very topical question at this time, because I don't know if you've heard about aphantasia. I think it's called aphantasia.
I've heard of that. Yep.
Yeah, it's essentially been discovered about 3 years ago.
I know exactly what this is, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's basically people. We've discovered that some people cannot picture things in their minds. They can't just form a picture in their mind, and that seems incredible because most people do. If I ask you to picture a beach, and you say, try to relax, imagine that you're on a beach side or something, and these people were never able to do that. But when they heard people say this, they thought it was a metaphor. You know, it was not.
Right.
They didn't actually really ask you to do this. It was just a way of speaking. But it's been discovered that there's a spectrum essentially on how good you can be at just picturing things in your mind. And I don't know if it's something that you're born with or if it's something that you can train. I really don't know, to be fair. I don't think there's enough data for that. But I can, to answer your question, I can usually visualize what I want to draw before I draw it. Now, it's not perfect. It's not in every detail, but I got a pretty good idea where it's supposed to be. So I play in my mind. I sort of move things around. I can construct different illustrations, drawings, and until I find something that I like. So different versions will go through my mind before I committed to drawing. Some other artists I know will have a different approach. They'll have to draw all these poses, and they'll fill up pages of different things until it looks right. Now, I don't use many references either, but I think that's comes with a lot of practice. I've been drawing and observing a lot through my life, so I can dive into this and use those references that I've acquired to draw confidently without necessarily use a reference. But I will occasionally be like, stumble upon a position or something that I just not comfortable with. For example, I don't draw many animals, so if I had to draw a lion today, I was like, okay, what's a lion's paw like exactly? Right. I had an idea, but I was like, okay, let's double check, and I went and found some references, and then I'll work with that. So yeah, I still use references now and then for sure.
I love it, man. That's just a neat glimpse into people. Like I can legit, and this aphantasia thing I thought was fascinating when people started figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked, like, close your eyes and imagine an apple. And it was like, cool, I totally see this red apple. I can spin it around in my head and all that. And then one of a very good friend of ours was like, what do you mean you see an apple? And I was like, close your eyes and see it. And he was like, no, I get like the idea of an apple, but I can't actually picture the apple. And we were like, what are you talking about, man? And then come to find out, there's a lot of people like that.
And that also too just shows how the variations just in life and in art are too, because you said a red apple, I pictured a green apple. Yeah, right. And that shows how just different everyone's perspective is and how they are and how they look at art in the world and stuff. But so you had mentioned about university and stuff back then. Did you go to school for animation? Like, where did you get started? When did you kind of realize you wanted to do this and this is going to be a career and you wanted to pursue it? Like, what was that kind of process like?
Yeah, it's funny. I often come back to, like, it started when I had a little conversation with my mom when I was a kid. And I was saying to my mom, Mom, why are you watching anime? Why are you watching cartoons? They're great. And then she was like, she told me something like, when you grow up, you'll stop watching cartoons. And I was like, no, why?
We just call it anime now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why would I ever stop loving animation? Anyway, that stayed with me. And but I never thought I could actually be an animator. It's something that in my family, there aren't many artists. To be fair, I was the first one to explore that sort of avenue. So I went to architecture because I was also a little bit of a science geek guy, and then it was a bit both together, and I did a bit of maths and physics. But architecture, I decided that by the end of it, I was like, this was fun, but I don't want to have a career in architecture. It's just not for me. So during the last year of my studies, I kind of spent a bit of time making a short film with a friend, having no idea where that was going, but for fun. And we mixed 3D and 2D. So we had 3D backgrounds, 3D spacecrafts, and 2D character in it. Mixing techniques already. It was a lot of fun. And that's when I realized, hang on, there's got to be a path into a career, that I've never considered before. So I looked into animation schools, and that's when I realized that there were some good animation schools in France, and some of those have an international reputation. But I went into a small school, a young one, that was teaching filmmaking in animation more than just animating exactly. So I learned about storyboarding, writing scripts, thinking about music, comping things together, as much as I learned about animating characters. So that was a very sort of well-rounded approach to animation, which I really, really enjoyed. And that was for about 2 years. But still, that was the beginning for me. I felt like I learned a lot during my career. I really improved my animation techniques. And so it's something I'm still evolving. And I'm teaching today a lot, but I feel like it's interesting thing to go on the teaching side because you have to theorize things a little bit. You have to explain to other people how to do it. And that forces you to have a different perspective on your own work. That was interesting for me, and it's a good thing too. So I keep learning, and I hope I will do that for another 20 years, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, like, I have a quick one too. Like you mentioned, the kind of one of your first real animations you did with your friend and stuff. Now, with all the characters you've created, in your career and in films you've done and all the stuff that you've made, Josh and I, we're fathers, we got kids. We love our kids, but we love them differently. Like, are all your creations do you just have a love for them all, or do you have one that's a certain favorite that you're always drawn to that resonates with you the best, or how does that work?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a bit like with children. I imagine I don't have children myself, but choosing your favorite drawing feels a bit cruel.
Yeah, yourself, yeah, exactly.
Like you feel bad for the other ones. No, it's funny. Sometimes I go back to some old drawings and I look at them and I'm like, oh, I still love that one. It's great. So it's not just the latest ones, honestly, the best ones for me. It's funny enough. I appreciate different things in different drawings because it's like an exploration thing. You're like, here's a new drawing. I'm going to try something with this one I haven't tried before. And every drawing has like a little bit of a story to it, something that it brings to my career as well. And I think the things I'm most proud of, though, remain little bits of animations. So throughout my career, I've done jobs, and that's interesting. I work for someone, they ask me to do this, and I do it. I can be proud of it, but it's never quite exactly what I want to do. So I did between jobs because I'm a freelancer, and I've got sometimes no work, and I'm okay with it because it's a great opportunity for me to be like, okay, I'm going to animate what I want to, and I will paint what I want to, and then I can just express myself and do just what I want. And these are the best bits I find for me that I enjoy the most. I did this little animation of like a Lord of the Rings scene with the wizard and I forget his name. Gandalf, that's against the Balrog and the bridge. I just wanted to animate that scene, and it's 5 seconds long or not even that. And I did a little fight between Ryu and Chun-Li just for fun. And
nice.
I'll just play with these scenes and make them look as cool as possible. And at the end of the day, these helped me get better jobs because I was pushing my skills. I was showing off my personal style as well, and I discovered that people liked that, and got me more work. So it was a good investment, a good use of my time, I think, at the end of the day.
How awesome, Josh! Like, could you imagine? Like, I can't even fathom just being a little bored, and I'm like, I'm just going to animate, Gandalf and Balrog fighting.
Dude, my brain is totally. I'm already thinking of these like epic fights that I would make people have. Like, oh my goodness, man! I can think of some songs where it's like, dude, this to like a fight scene would be incredible.
Right?
I know, right?
Oh man. So listen, we're starting to run out of time here, but we did promise this topic early on, and honestly, I think it's a fantastic topic. I know that there are a lot of strong opinions on the use of AI art, and kind of the emergence of AI and how that affects artists specifically. I mean, I think it ties into art primarily, in the sense that people that have these very strong opinions of it, I think it's tied to art, because people that say, hey, AI use of art is very wrong because it is taking samples of people's artwork and it is plagiarizing those. It is, stealing that art and then it's kind of compiling it together. I think people that are for it are just going, it's a really easy way for me to get something that I wouldn't pay somebody for to commission or something like that, because it's a simple use of something. So, being that this is a very intimate topic for you as an artist and an animator, what are your thoughts on the use of like AI art?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's a very hot topic at the moment, and it will be for a while, I think. No, I have to agree with the idea that the way it was created by essentially scraping the internet of all this art and using this, and clearly people are using this to make money now. I can see that everywhere. It's a bit heartbreaking. It's a bit of a shame for sure, and it feels like we can't. There's not much we can do to stop it. I think you're not going to see big production companies doing that just yet because they're too exposed. But there's tons of little independent businesses that will use that shamelessly and make money from that. It's a bit of a shame for sure. At the same time, I think AI is amazing. In other ways, it's a great progress, and I think it will bring a lot of good stuff. So I'm worried. Obviously, I think it will take the jobs of quite a few of us for sure. But I'm also pretty confident that it's not going to make artists disappear at all. I don't think so. One of the things that I like to take as an example is that is the fact that we have an interest in what people do, right? It's one thing that a machine can do this or do that. And we're impressed the first time a machine can fly, it's amazing. And then nowadays, everybody gets on a plane and it's fine. But if someone goes out and builds a little bike with little wings and manages to fly with his own energies, people will be amazed. Not because he can fly. We can go to the moon. It's because it's a human performance, right? And that's why we put tens of thousands of people in stadiums to watch people run around a ball, you know?
Right, yeah.
Why do we do this? Because it's the human performance. We love to see people do things that are interesting, right? And I think it doesn't matter if a computer can draw an amazing picture and make an amazing film. We'll be like, yeah, great. I'll play the game. It sounds fun. Or I'll watch that movie. It sounds fun. But when a guy comes along and does something beautiful, you'll still be like, wow, this is amazing. You'll still be able to measure that it's a great achievement, that an artist can do this or paint that. So I think we'll keep an interest for what human-made things are, you know.
I think we can absolutely tell already, you know, like when something is made with AI, and even like, you know, we're starting to see these AI videos now, and it's like, dude, these are getting more and more lifelike, and it's like, it's kind of scary in a way. But at the same time, you know, I think we're very much able to go, oh, this was totally made with AI. And, you know, maybe it gets to a point where we can't tell. That's the scary part to me. But I do think that there's this, I call it sterile, right? Like there's this sterile feel to AI art or video or something like that, where I think we can just inherently feel that. And we know that like creativity or like passion is just missing, you know, and I think people can sense that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It feels a bit soulless, right? When you
exactly. Soulless is a really great term, and I think we pick up on that easily too.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to tell a quick story too about with AI and the creation of art, because my son, he's 8 now, but when he was a lot younger, we watched the animated movie Cars a ton, and they have Tomater. And then Star Wars, big Star Wars fans. So we had Darth Vader, and so my son always called him, you know, Mater, like Darth Mater. And so I had Josh create me an AI real quick art thing of a Darth Mater. It looked like Mater with, you know, as Darth Vader. Awesome. And it was awesome. And it was something that we could do on the spot, but there wasn't that kind of almost story or history behind an artist creating it. It was cool to see. It was something we laughed at, but there wasn't anything that you resonated with. So again, like, I love that there wasn't a soul to it. So it was something we saw, had fun with, and kind of passed on. And, you know, you don't have that connection like with an actual commissioned artist or something like that. So I do think that, while AI can make some fun stuff if it's used kind of in that fun, campy way, like a true artist, there is that feeling in that bond with that art.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I feel like it's with time, AI will get better at doing things like this, and it's about who prompts the AI to do something. I think if there's a way to prompt AI that will make some interesting content, and I do follow on social media some AI creators, because they use it in a way that would not be viable by normal artists. The way they produce some imagery each one of them would take so much time. You would not see that kind of content already just done by humans, because it's too much work. And that, in a way, if they do it in an interesting way, you get something interesting out of it, right? And that's cool. So I think it's about who does it and how they direct the AI to do something interesting. So I think it's okay. AI can produce something interesting as long as there's a direction behind it. And also it has a lot of, like you said, you know, with your child, you can go out and create something. So for example, I had a friend who had this card game project, and he can't draw, and he wanted to sell this card game project to publishers, and used AI to generate different card looks and styles for his card project. And it's great. You get sort of a preview of what it could be, and that's very, very handy to be able to do that with the project. That if the project gets made, then you hire an artist to create the final visuals. I think that kind of use is fine. In animation as well, you'll see clients coming with a pitch. Usually they'll be like saying, I want something a bit like this, and they might have a reference or something. And nowadays they come in and like they've already generated graphics, and like, I want it to look like this, and they give you this AI reference. Feels a little bit insulting. You're like, come on, what are you doing? And it's kind of weird, because they come up with this very sort of amazingly crafted thing in a way, and you're like, I can't animate this, and this is beyond human. Like, it was certainly not in your budget that you want to use.
Right.
So
how many years do you have?
Yeah, exactly. So there's some funny situations like this, but I can see the use of it nonetheless. I think it's getting more and more used, and it can be good. But I do worry that it will shrink the industry at some point, and then people will be able to do art, but may not be so many people that can make a living out of it. I don't know. It will be different.
So this is a good question, and I know we're almost running out of time here. So do you think, like, with the use of AI, I know that there's a big backlash, especially with artists. Like my family, my kids and my wife refuse to even look at it. Like because they are artists, and they are like, dude, I don't want to look at this. I don't think people should be using it, because they're like, because it's taking away from like our talent, like this is a talent that we have, and they're very, very against it. But at the same time, I think that there's also this, it's not going away, like humans are going to keep using this. We're going to keep refining it. So do you think, like, is there a world where, especially for artists and animators, that AI can become a tool, like another brush, so to speak, where it's like, hey, we can accept this, we can figure out ways to use this to help us? Or do you think that's just crossing that line and it's like, no, this needs to stay out of art completely?
I think it will be interesting when you have a good interface to work with. So imagine a proper Photoshop kind of application that has really good tools that you can really use to craft something with AI. Right now, it's kind of prompting a bit of text, and then you kind of hope that it will give you something good, right? And when it gives you something, there's not much that you can do to change it, and there's a difficulty to create something that's consistent. So, for example, for me, maybe if I wanted to use it, let's say we're in the future now, and AI is really easy to use, and it can do anything you want. Well, what I would probably do is that I would probably design my own characters, still draw them, and I could use AI to say, hey, can you refine my drawing? Just make it look a bit better. And I would say, I want more contrasted colors or something, and I could say exactly what I want. And I could say the AI, just do a 3D model of this. And then I could go in there and then draw over it to fix things. I don't like the belt here. I'm just going to do that. And then it kind of integrates this into it, and it would be seamless. And then I would be like, okay, now I'm going to do a little storyboard, but I'm going to make it simple. Do very quickly some thumbnails that give it a good idea of the story. And I could just give that to the AI and kind of generate, with my style, what I designed, and create a story that I want to see. It would be quite satisfying and a kind of quick way to get to something that looks good without too much work. And I understand that if everybody can do this, then how do you make money from it? It's another question, but I think a lot of people could create their own content that way as well. That would be interesting, I think. It's hard to imagine everything we could do, but I could see myself use it if I was kind of born with it and still want to draw and still use it at the same time. I think it could be interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, this is fascinating stuff, man. And I really appreciate like the look. I mean, this is something that I know, like even in our own gaming community, we've had a lot of discussion on the use of AI art and stuff like that. And I know it's a topic that we don't really get insight into, from people like yourself that do this for a living and have done this and are obviously super, super talented with it as well. We are almost out of time, so we're going to start wrapping things up. But one of the things that we always love to ask is, is there a project? Is there a cause? Is there something that you are working on or that you are passionate about that you want to share with people that we could, help that with?
Well, I don't know. This could be a little bit political. I don't know if you want that on your show, but it's because I'm sort of reacting to what's happening on the news. And one of the things I want to do is to encourage artists to speak up a little bit, not necessarily in a controversial way or in an aggressive way, but to sort of take a stand a little bit on what their values are, because I think it would be good if more people were less shy about saying what they want out of the world and out of politics a little bit, so that it could be a bit more common to say, I want people to help each other, for example. I want people to have a bit more sharing the wealth or protecting the planet or these sort of things. So I sort of created this look where people wear a red glove, and it's a
I've seen that on your Instagram.
You've seen it. It's like a thumbs down thing to protest a little bit against abuses and about bad politics, if you want, and it's to encourage people to say out loud without being too controversial. So it's trying to find the line so that you don't get too much heat in return or too much backlash. So that's my little project at the moment. I started this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to try to encourage people to do this. This is purely a social media sort of challenge that I created. On Instagram, you can create these art challenges, and people kind of get on with it if they find it interesting. It's a way of interacting with your community on social media. Otherwise, I still had this project that I had last year. I had this project called Blue, and it was a project of short film that I tried to launch on Kickstarter. But because, as you know now, animation is expensive, I needed a lot of money to this. And I tried to put the bar high, and I was relatively high, let's say. And I was trying to get to a certain amount of money. And I was like, it's going to fall short. So I kind of stopped the campaign midway. But I did spend like a year to build up to this. But the project is still there. And I'm thinking maybe I will turn this into a comic book or something like this in the future.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So is the Kickstarter still functional? Like, could we include a link to the Kickstarter?
No, the Kickstarter was actually a year ago. Okay. But it's still up. You can still look at the project if you're interested and check it out, see what it's about. It's a bit about AI. It's about sci-fi. It's about students trying to build an AI, actually, and trying to talk about these topics. So, yeah.
This is awesome. All right. Well, we have to check out this a little bit more. And so if you decide to bring this project back into the forefront for you, absolutely let us know, because we would love to help shout that out and kind of get that in front of people as well.
And the teasers, I mean, we're going to put all your information in, the description on everything, but the teasers for Blue are all over your YouTube. Which shout out to your YouTube also. Everyone listening should definitely go check it out, because along all these other animations you have on there, you have tutorial processes on designing, and I was watching a lot of your videos, and they were so interesting. And I'm a slightly competent artist, but I found them so fascinating. So anyone is gonna love them. So everybody should definitely go check those out as well.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, man, this has been awesome, man.
Cool.
I wish we could just keep going, but we got to wrap things up at some point, and we want to be respectful of your time as well. Sykosan, I mean, we cannot thank you enough for just taking time out of your day to hop on with us, to give us a glimpse into the world of animation, art, what the mind of a fantastic artist is like, and to just give us that peek behind the curtain. So, I mean, thank you so much for taking time to just kind of hang out with us, man.
I had a great time, guys. You're amazing, and I always love talking about animations. So that was great. Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit more and to let people know about what animators do.
And awesome. For everybody, it's Sykosan. When you're searching it, Sykosan. So
we're gonna leave a couple links in the episode description too, to absolutely kind of let people see how amazing your talent is. So
sweet,
awesome,
fantastic.
Well,
thanks,
Sykosan, thank you so much once again. Honestly, man, this has been fantastic. That's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you everybody for tuning in and learning a little bit more about the gaming industry and art and animation. We hope you enjoyed this. That's gonna do it for this episode. Until next time, happy gaming.
See ya.